So hi everyone, this is Dr. Alana and I'm delighted to talk today about coding and qualitative analysis in general. I think it's a topic that as I watch students go through the process of having qualitative data and working for the first time with it, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that somehow get in people's heads going in. So let's see if we can burst some of those so you'll have an easier time of it. I'm going to go through a thought process about how to get started, a little bit of conversation about coding, more conversation about analysis, and then the sorting mechanism, and then into where the real analysis lies, which is visualizations and other kinds of thought processes. So this is an iterative cycle. It is not a straight line. Quantitative data is much more linear than qualitative data is, but that's to be expected. Quantitative data is much more left brain and qualitative data is much more right brain, if we were to talk about it from our experience as human beings. At the end, I'm going to take questions. It's www.wooclap, wooclap.com, and today's link is QualQS, so qualitative questions. And if you'll go there, if you have questions as you go along, please put them in the WooClap. I will read them in the order they come in, and that way you can use the chat to talk to each other, to put up. Sometimes you will have good resources to share. We love that kind of contribution. So go ahead and use the chat for that. Okay, so let's start with, I have some data. I'm going to work with a piece of qualitative software. And how do I think about it? I thought that this top quote was something you should all absolutely keep in mind, that qualitative literature, as we use software more and more, expects of us a detailed analysis of what we did and how we did it. So this is absolutely work that requires a research journal and you keeping track of what you do day by day and where you want to go next and the thoughts you had. You may not be called upon to deliver that kind of record, but you may. And you can't make it up nearly as convincingly later, looking back, as you can if you just open the journal and keep a little track all the time. So that's the first step. Second thing I need you to understand is that coding is not analysis. Okay, so you know that you have to get to qualitative analysis. The coding is merely a step of sorting material, but it in of itself is not analysis. That doesn't mean it doesn't open up your brain to think about these things differently. The analysis section is much later. And I think that goes hand in hand with why this is frustrating with the last thing. Be prepared. This takes a lot of time. So people will say, I just spent months on my coding, and you trying to tell me that's not analysis? Know ahead of time and segment your time accordingly. So there are two stages. What do you actually do? In the first stage, you pull your data into the software. What kind of data? Well, in today's world, your data could be videos, it could be audio, it could be transcripts, it could be all kinds of things. So all of that, you need to, whatever your data are, you need to have a kind of software that will work with those data. And if you haven't chosen, as I talk today, I'm going to talk about things you might consider as you're choosing your software. You want to be able to pull in whatever those data are fairly easily. And then the second kind of data is about the storage of it all. And this mostly hits people who are working with videos, etc. You need to sort out where those big files are going to be, how they're transcribed. So there's some stuff you have to figure out. Stage 2 is the first level of the conceptual stage. And I was brought up in a qualitative tradition that talked about it in terms of open and selective. Other qualitative traditions talk about it in terms of inductive and deductive. But basically it amounts to, I'm reading what I have, or I'm watching what I have, and I'm having ideas. And I want to code that segment with that idea. And then as I come across other things that triggers the same idea, I can code those things, that idea. And then I can click on the code and up come all the things I thought at the time were somehow related, even though they were across multiple types of data. Selective coding is when I have a format, I am looking at specifically whether these have these. My whole process has been very specific because my field is very clear that these variables are important and I need to see if they exist on this other plane, something like that. That's selective. I know going in what I'm looking for. Open, I'm not so sure what I'm looking for. I'm just letting my intuition say, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That'll hit my topic. And typically we do want both, one and the other. After we selectively code, we might go back just to see if there's other interesting bits that we hadn't considered, looking for disconfirming evidence, for instance. So stage 2 is the conceptual stage. Again, this is just about coding. You are setting up sorting mechanisms, really. You have a lot of words, and you have said that those words cluster over here, and you keep pointing things to those clusters. Eventually, you can click on the cluster, and you can see all the things that got put there. Very handy. Much handier than the old days when people had to cut it up and put them in file folders, have multiple copies. I mean, that worked. I have seen some beautiful dissertations that were done that way, but this is handier. Okay, so what do you need out of it? That's the question that needs to drive your thoughts. Are you answering questions? So is your whole thing set up? You're going to answer these research questions. Then you need all those codes to add up to an answer to those questions. So one of the things that happens with open coding is you can find some rabbit holes. Oh, that was really interesting, but it has nothing to do with my study. So just be aware that open coding may have rabbit holes. On the other hand, you may be looking to build a new theory. If you're doing grounded theory, then you may be putting all this together to literally develop a new theory about how all these things work. So you are looking for relationships between this and this and this from the very beginning. Just think about those things, and look at the software as you're investigating software. Look into some of the things I'm going to discuss in a little while with the visualization process to see which ones might have the tools you need to get you to the place you want to go. And then no matter what you're going in looking for, I want you to, in your journal, take some time to examine your personal bias. What answers do you think you're going to get? Write it down, make it obvious, and then watch for it not to affect your coding. Think about how you went after disconfirming evidence, because you'll be called on to examine your biases. So might as well do it at the beginning and then keep notes as you go along about when you saw some things that were counterintuitive to you and how you investigated those more thoroughly. Another thing that you may be called upon to do, I have mixed feelings about this as a researcher, is you may be called upon to have a neutral critical friend. I think that's kind of a good idea. Or you may be called upon to have a second coder or to go for inter-rater reliability. My experience of inter-rater reliability is that it's very difficult to get because it's very difficult for two people to understand words to mean the same thing. So if you are working in a field where it's everybody absolutely understands that X is X under all conditions, then probably inter-rater reliability and working out a code book and saying these are what we're looking for, and the other person looks at them and agrees and then looks at blank, the same data you have, only doesn't have any codes, and they code it. Or maybe they see that you coded something there. Some software will allow you to just take the code off. So they see you coded something, and then they can look to see what they would have called that section. Different ways of doing it. As I said, a lot of work for not much bang for your buck or time, in my opinion. But you may be called upon to do it, and so then you will need to dig deeper into how to make it efficient. Okay, so know where you're going. Now, you've got your data in, you've segmented some sections with some different codes, you have a beginning list of codes. What do you do with them? If that's not analysis, what is analysis? Well, I'm going to show you some tools in a minute, but analysis is when you can take the totality of what you've got and you can produce a summary of it or an abstract of its outcome, of how the codes went together. You're building a finding. You have a question and you have some results, and those results need to be formatted and clustered together in a way that will lead your reader to understand in your discussion section what you found, what you think those results mean. So this is the part that is, for me, it's like I have all my puzzle pieces laid out, and I've clustered, puzzles probably a pretty good, and I've clustered analogy, because I've clustered the blues and the reds and the greens. And I'm beginning to move them around on the table to see if I can build a picture out of them. And the picture gets kind of together. And then I have to go look to see if I can find the pieces, because somewhere else are the rest of the pieces or not. So, and the looking and putting together in different colors we do in software through different tools and experiences. Ultimately, we want to get to a point where we can draw some conclusions. And one of the great things that I really appreciate doing is to go back to the people who gave me the data in the first place and say, when I look at this whole picture, I kind of draw these conclusions. What do you think? And I like to hear, because always their thoughts about my conclusions take my conclusions up. It's the best peer review in the world, in my opinion. So analysis is an iterative and ongoing process. So those of us who are involved in qualitative research, we feel like it never ends. But sometimes we have to call it off, and it ends for the dissertation here, and it ends for this project over here, and it keeps going. Okay. How do we capture these thoughts we have? Big challenge. In qualitative software, the easiest thing to do is to capture it in memos. Because a memo is a system where you can have thoughts, you can write them in, and then every so often you can just click on memos and you can see all your thoughts. You can also color code the memos into different kinds of thoughts. So you have some sorting mechanism. And they are hooked to the thing you had the thought about. That's the important part. Because the challenge here is that you've got too many moving pieces. And when it comes time to really write them up, you can't find that one that you can kind of remember having. So I like memos to be dated. And then in an ideal world, I have written in my journal, here is what I'm working on today. I work on it. I see some stuff that intrigues me. I put a memo up that has the date on it. So I could even say, oh yeah, I thought about this in my book. And then I can go find the memos that have that date and they can lead me. You see what you need? You need to set up this leads to this, leads to this trail. Those are the kinds of things you don't think about when you're first starting until you need them. So I hope it's helpful and that you'll think about them more because you watched this. The analysis, this is a comment from somebody else, but I thought it was key. What analysis is the question, what does the data say? Not what I think about it. Analysis is what do the data say? So my thoughts about it are separate from that, just so that you have that in your head. And that's why they go nicely in memos. And interpretation is what does it mean? So you might have two kinds of memos. You might make them two different colors. Analysis memos and interpretation memos. What does the data say and what does it mean? And they'll both develop iteratively over time. Now, memos are a way of summarizing where you are during your analysis. There are also summary tools that I'll get to in a minute. So, good. We've got our stuff. We've coded it. We've written a few memos about it. We're on our way towards analysis. Now, what we need to do is sort this material into themes and moving towards results, moving towards something concrete that we can put in that section of our writing. So this is a reduction at its heart. You are reducing a lot of stuff into a little. And my experience of this is that it happens in flashes. I work with it, it seems a big mess, I get a little discouraged, da-da-da-da-da, I go to sleep, I do something else, I come back and I get it, oh, I think it'll reduce into this. So don't be discouraged as you go along, just keep working the process and know that your goal is that it reduces into those few things you can say to other people like, of course this is how it reduced. So you're searching for commonalities. You're also looking at contrasts and comparisons. See, now you're into do they go together? Are they separate? How you're trying to figure it out. That analogy of the elephant, and everybody looks at it from a different angle. So the person that's describing a leg is different than the person that's describing the trunk. That's what you're doing here, is you're looking at all the blue pieces and all the red pieces, and then eventually how it comes together in a picture begins to make sense. And sometimes you will do that through grouping your data, and I'll show you that in a minute. And sometimes you'll do it through meaning. So you may recode a whole section as something else because the meaning becomes clear. This will make more sense when we see it play out. And open, selective, inductive, deductive, you do them both. One day you're kind of reading through, thinking, what does all this mean? Another day you have an idea. Can I put them all in columns this way and compared to columns this way? And what does that look like? Okay, that's the basics. Those are your steps. Now, if I was just starting this, that last section would make my head get a little cranky because it isn't specific enough. So now I'm going to go to the tools to help it be specific for you so you can actually see how it might work. If you are still choosing your software, I have a link for you in a little while of software that's free. It doesn't have to cost anything. Chances are your university is giving you something, probably NVivo if you're in the United States, maybe something else. Almost all the software companies, and the big three are probably Atlas TI, NVivo, and MaxQDA. But there are others that are pretty close to those. They all started from the same point of taking codes, but they also are companies and they're selling to different audiences, and those different audiences have different needs. And over time, they change a little based upon who their major customers are. How they differ the most is in the visualization. So if you can, jump to the end in your mind. Go find other people that have asked similar questions and see what kind of visualizations they are using at the end on their data. You may have a better time of finding the right trajectory for your work. I think all these software companies are about the same. I have preference to the one I chose, but you just have to get into it, see what you think. If your study is very intuitive, lived experience, you're probably going to want to test it from a lot of different visualization angles because those are subtle and they are complex, and you're going to want to see it from different positions. So go look at your software and look up, do a keyword search on visualization and then your software package, and see what PDFs they're giving you about all the things you can do, and make sure you're going to get the output you think you're going to need before you choose your package. At the very basic level is code frames. And this is a very simple picture of one customer service question. You would have negative and positive responses. And that was the first sort. So I asked a question, I got these answers, and then when I look at the answers that are positive, it sort of sorts out into these three things. When I look at the answers that are negative, it sort of sorts out into these three things. Hierarchical coding frames, very handy. Very handy for you to keep it straight in your head, very handy for your reader to get a picture of where this is going. That's one kind of visualization. I'm going to jump now to screen share, but I've given you the two documents from MaxQDA, which is my software, and NVivo, which is likely going to be the software for a lot of you. And these are their PDFs about visualizations, and they're very, very similar. So I'm going to jump now to my screen. So this is MaxQDA. And the very first thing that they start with is the Code Matrix browser. And I've also used Deduce for a while. The easiest thing for software to do is to put it into X and Y axis. And so these are certain documents, and they had different codes. This is in German, so we can't see the specifics, but you can see that some of the boxes are bigger than other boxes. So B04 Hans said a lot about that particular topic area. And then it gives you a summary about how many codes there were overall for that. Basic XY axis. Everybody will do that. They call it different things, but everybody will do it. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is see relationships between the major topics. So this was, what did people say? What did friends say? What did parents say? What does the partner say? What does siblings say about this topic? And then you can see the overlaps with, and this is done by your ability to highlight certain things that you want to compare, and then you tell the software to do the comparison. Very similar, cross tabulations literally counts how many people in the rural area lost their jobs, how many people in the urban area lost their jobs, who had pensions, who didn't have pensions, etc. So now this one I thought might not be as easy in some software packages as others. This is about quotes. So under the code emotion, some quotes that were coded family status married versus family status single. And they would bring up the full quote so you could see side by side the differences or similarities between them. They have something called Smart Publisher, which is just, you can get a document going, and then as you put up new stuff, it'll go into the document. Not sure how. I think that's more for marketing than it is for academics. They also show you that you can do things with audios and visuals. Okay, then this is pretty basic because it's like Excel. You can build your tables and then you can show them in visual forms. Summary grids. This is the one that I used most for lit review. So these little blue boxes are where a code overlapped in a lit. It was a document. It could be a person if you were doing interviews. You click on that, you read everything that that person said or that document said about that issue, and then you summarize it. And then later on, you can pull up these really handy charts where your summaries are all together. And for my way of thinking, that's a quick way to get a handle on what is really being said here over a lot of data. So I liked the summary grids and the summary tables quite a bit. And then there's a mixture of these. You can do them in percentage and codes once you get those things. This is the other thing that, and a variation on this, that may be very interesting to some of you. You may want to have pictures that go with words, and you want to see how they connect to people and how those people had stories that they were telling. You want to build a fairly complex mind map of what you are seeing, and that mind map will come from many different things, and you'll want to be able to move them around. So this particular software does that. It also does these cool things with codes. So you can use colors to show you how much of something is going on in what cases. And you can also bring it up so how many documents actually talked about these things versus how many documents talked about this. I call this the forest in the trees. When you're doing qualitative work, it's real easy to drill into all the trees and lose sight of the forest. So you could have some really interesting trees over here. If you can see my green thing go around, yeah, you can on the screen. You know, these little guys could be really interesting trees, but you do want to, your results are likely in the forest as well. Word clouds, very popular. The thing about word clouds is you need to take out all the words you don't want it to count, or you're going to get a lot of and, the, that kind of stuff. And some variables can go to SPSS. One of the advantages of MaxQDA is that it works with both qualitative and quantitative software. Okay, so that's a particular software program just to give you a sense of what kinds of things you might be looking for. Now, what have I given you? Because I want to leave lots of time for questions. So in the handouts, you have these slides. And so the basics, there's a free, so what did I curate out of all of this? There's a guide to free qualitative software. There's some really good, the other three things here are what I called quality basic things you might want to read. So if you're just starting, take a look at the 4 links on this basic page and have some thoughts. When you are drilling into visualizations, you should also be thinking about what are people saying about visualizations in research, and what are they using, and are there some models out there I would want to shoot for. Those things will be on this page, and in some of them, I've told you what I thought was important. So if you're looking for lit on qualitative software visualizations, then you want to go to the method space, because she did a good job of curating other people's lit. If you want to, if you think you're going to need a timeline, you absolutely want to go to timelineLab.com. It has the best timelines I've ever seen. Beautiful use of a timeline that also connected video and other things together. Beautiful. So we are entering a world where data can be so much more fascinating for our readers than it ever was before. I have a question in the chat that I'll address. Where can you get these links? By going on this page right now in the room, chats, and then next to chat is handouts. So if you click on handouts, these slides will be there as PDFs, and they will have active links. Someone asked about disconfirming evidence. Qualitative work has a higher potential likelihood for researcher bias. And in fact, some of us would say we just have to own that we are naturally biased as researchers. But quantitative people have an edge. People who do quantitative research have an edge because it's hard for figures to be statistically significant when they're not. It is not hard in qualitative work to take such a slice that agrees with our bias that we produce work that agrees with our bias. So our ethical boundary must be that we actively look for disconfirming evidence, for evidence that does not agree with our bias, for people who said things, and in fact, there's a series on PD education that I did about storytelling science. So you can look up storytelling and you'll find them as a word, as a keyword search. And David Boji would say that we all know that we have bias and that we should get 2 or 3 bits of data from people. And then we should go look for people who are going to disagree with what we just heard. We're going to ask people, do you know of people who would disagree with your point of view? I want to interview those people. So that then we have a bigger and bigger increasing circle of our evidence base being within our bias range and outside of our bias range. That's disconfirming evidence. Okay, so pretty short and sweet, really, for a big topic, but my goal was to give you some very specific tools that could help launch this for you, and enough background material that would take it further. So now is your time to go to wooclap.com/qualqs and just put in everything that you have questions about, and you can be specific to your particular problem too if you want to, but you have to give me enough background information I can answer your question or give you some hints. And as you're doing that, I just want to tell you a few fun things. Okay, so we are the first one on this. What else is happening this week that you may want to pay attention to? If you are in pre-proposal land, I recommend that you consider coming Thursday to the open office hours. It's a great way to get your questions answered about the specific things that go on as you're doing research design and getting your proposal together. We 2 weeks ago had to move a webinar on anxiety to this coming Friday because of the speaker. Erica had anxiety issues when she was in graduate school, and she will talk about that and what she learned and what she recommends. And next Monday, for my 15 minutes, I'm talking about note-taking, but I thought to myself, well, what am I really talking about here? Because note-taking is so much more potential than just I'm listening to a lecture and I'm writing down things. It takes us to a realm where we have thoughts and we guide our ship because of those thoughts, and then it's hand in glove really with developing our own voice. And so voice is a very specific and interesting topic as we become authors, and note-taking is a step to voice. So come join me if that's of interest to you. I also want to say that research boot camps are just around the corner. By the middle of April, you will start seeing, so look for emails that talk about your opportunity to go to either a pre-proposal or a post-data boot camp. They are 10 weeks or 8 weeks. They are a fundamentally big period of time to get a lot of work done. And they are set up to be not exactly step by step by step, but you will have tons of resources and a very specific, this is your goal for this week. You reflect on how you did on that goal. So you will have a sense of moving along and being part of a wider community as well, if that's of interest. And yes, you can go to whatever your PD education site is as of today, and you will see the new beta, almost done, is up. So some key things I think are important. Look for something called My PD Zone. Look for the fact it's very clean, has very little on it. You'll see your general topic areas. You'll see, do I want to look for articles or videos or what in those topic areas? A few things at the top. And when you find something that you like, that you want to save, you just have to push the heart. And then you'll be able to go to My PD Zone, and there will be all the things you thought you wanted to look at later. It's surprising it took this open source system so long to get to that ability for you to have your own actual interaction now with all of these support systems. So we're really excited about that. There's easier format for finding things. Be a little patient. The first search seems to take a while, and the secret is to click on the right-hand side and only search. If you want articles, only search for articles. If you want videos, only search for videos. Because if you type in writing, it's going to take a really long time to find out all the stuff on writing on the site. And you don't want to wait that long. It relies less on email. Used to be that it was an email structure that sent you box sets. Box sets are now a page you can just go to and click on the ones you want. We still will be sending some things by email, the 30-day writing challenge, the 10-week-day writing boost. Those things are still to be delivered to you one step at a time. To the email that is your sign-in on the site, by the way. So that's important that you realize. And it's your same old sign-up. Okay, if you find anything wrong, Sonia at PD Education wants to hear it. If you clicked on something and it was a 404, tell us. We're now in cleanup mode, but we're really excited. So I'm glad they were helpful to people who, and then we'll go now to the screen and see about some questions. How is a questionnaire to be used in a qualitative research approach? So I use surveys, questionnaires. Let's just say that words are basically synonymous. And I use them in my bootcamp research. So you sign up for bootcamp, and you have to do a survey in order to get in. And the survey has you sign up for one of 3 groups. So the first thing that the survey or questionnaire does is it puts this bit of data into a sorting mechanism from the very beginning. It also may ask questions based upon previous research. If you are stalled out in graduate work, it is likely for one of, say, 10 different reasons. So if you put yourself in the stalled group, you would be given these 10 reasons, and I would ask you to click all that apply. So that's another sorting mechanism that drills that first one a little deeper. Very handy later when you're doing the X and Y axis to be able to have those. Then you have open-ended questions in surveys and questionnaires where you're getting a little bit more background data. What happened? Why did you stall? What support do you think you need? Where do you want to go? Bye to people who are leaving. And so that's how I use questionnaires. Probably in today's world, if you can justify that you have a question and this is the most efficient way to get the answers to the question, that's the right tool for you. Part of it is that every time you use a tool, unless you have another mechanism to make sure, so if your data system is that I'm going to use a questionnaire, but only 3 people fill out the questionnaire, you just lost a whole lot more than you gained. So the use of questionnaires as part of a catalog of qualitative data collection needs to be really thought out. That's exactly what happened last year. We had a survey. We got some really interesting survey data, but it had no power because there weren't enough of it compared to the overall population. So I couldn't make it work. This year, I put another constraint in the making it work so that people who really care about getting into bootcamp will do that survey, and then I'll be able to match up numbers and have some realistically good evidence as to the power in doing boot camps. Do you have any direction leads on case study methodology using mixed methods? Yes, I do, of course. Let me think about this. So you're studying something. I think, okay, so case studies maybe are more likely to be all retrofitted data. Something happened. Maybe you as a researcher get to do it a little bit of planning and then watch it through. That's more like an evaluation study where it's kind of ongoing and you get to put your data points in. But a lot of times a case study is looking at a situation that's pretty well all done and dusted, and you are sorting out all the data you can get from it. So then it really is a lot of, I recommend a spreadsheet with all the possibilities and and you're trying to figure out where those data points are going to add up to answering the questions you want to ask. And it's easier at some points to massage the question than it is to massage the data points. So direction. Is this a case study where I have some input or not? If not, all the data points, spreadsheet, figure out how they intersect with what I want or not. And if they don't quite intersect, can I go back to those people and get this bit of data I need? If I'm starting it now, I'm looking at building a case study. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Then you have a better chance of putting all the right pieces in place. So I'm going to have this much qualitative data, this much, but then you have to make really sure that you have control over actually getting the data, because a lot of that kind of mixed method reliability will depend upon the fact that the same people did this as did this. See, there can be the disconnect. Presenting the data through visual representations and tables are strong. The challenge is to actually provide an explanation. Too many times, this is so big, it's hard to, let me see. I think I can go like that so I can read it. Okay, the challenge is to actually provide an explanation. Too many times the information is presented and the readers are expected to read the mind of the person presenting the data. Well, not if you're going to get to defense, they're not. So just to stop there, and then I'll answer the specific question. But if the data are presented in a table, they are done so that then the researcher, either just before that table or just after that table, explains what they get out of that table, what they see as the results. And the way I do that, when I have tables of information, like comparisons between the boot camps or whatever, is I highlight the sections that I want them to look at, and I explain what I saw. And but they also see the full data, so they can ask questions about things that weren't in the explanation. All right, so I don't believe that if you're doing a good job, you are just giving somebody a table. But can I explain how a doctoral student can represent the following? Steps in the coding process, steps in the reduction phase, and steps in the analysis process. This is going to depend on your committee. Frankly, I don't care about that stuff if I'm examining. I want you to just tell me that you came up with so many codes that after a process of reduction got to be this many codes, and the key reason you reduced from one to another was similarity along these lines. You can tell me that and I can follow your logic. Those are words. That's a paragraph. Steps in the analysis process. I hate to see it in the methodology section because they just become long, but they maybe have usefulness as an appendix where I might take screenshots of different phases. The only reason I would do that personally in a PhD process is if one of my committee was a methodologist and was really going to look seriously at that level of detail. What I hope they're seeing when they get to your final document are the comments that you're making. So I would say chapter 3, do it in words. Chapter 4, this is then where I find visuals very helpful. And so not like I'm using my own data, this many interviews worked out to be this many codes. but they clustered around these things. I might even show a cluster map or a Venn diagram that showed the way the clusters worked. And because they clustered around those things, I logically developed into a deeper query about, in which I found results that took me from this level to this level, and here are some examples of both. So I would do a mixture of starting with giving me the bigger picture in something. Could be a word map, could be a word cloud, could be a cluster of data, could be a summary table. Done, you like the one then in MaxQDA where you have bigger boxes for more data there. And the weaving in and out, this is where it's an art form and not a specific, way of doing it. So I'm a believer of models. I'm a believer of listening to other people's work and going on the web and finding other people's dissertations and looking for models that aren't in my field at all, but are indicative of something I think I might be interested in, just to see how it plays in my mind. And then weaving that together. And hopefully you have then this is where a good working relationship with your committee is very important. Because once you get to the stage where you're weaving interpretation of data in and out, you want to drop by somebody's office and say, this is what I've got. This is what it looks like. Would you just ask me questions, see whether or not what I think I'm on is the right path? So those are my 2 cents there. How to present the data analysis in our chapter. Will excerpts or quotes is enough? Not enough specificity for me. For me, I need to see, think of it as a Venn diagram. I need to see your big picture. How many? How many? How did it cluster? Tell me the big thing. Then drill into the this or that continuum of results on a particular topic, thematics. I got these 5 themes, but this theme has got much more of that theme than this theme than this theme. And then into excerpts or quotes. So I can see the human content that went with the thematic organizational process. I have the kind of mind that wants to see both. So that's what I would ask for if I was on your committee. Analyzing, VR films, which do not play. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? I haven't seen anybody come up with VR. Very technical, multimodal transcriptions, gaze, space, movement, etc. Done and imported into MaxQDA. Coding, you are at the leading edge of pushing this stuff. Good for you. Coding the transcripts and alternating between the VR headset and the transcript as data. Seem to be using the software for advanced tagging, memoing. Yes, that would make sense. Very helpful process, but get the feeling I'll be quizzed for not using the software for its intended purpose. I don't know about that. I would think that you are using the software for its intended purpose, because then what you can do with those codes, and if it's MaxQDA, I know you can do it, is you can start to draw those maps of codes and how they went together. So you're taking the VR and reducing it like a summary into the memo. That's how I justify it if I were you. Maybe your memos will be both, you know, I mentioned that there were two types of analysis memos and an interpretation, and maybe yours are interpretation memos. So maybe you need to redo some analysis memos and then use those, because you can't get to the, and then maybe are you going to have one headset and you're going to have a few clips people can see? That's what they're going to want to do. So, yeah, fascinating. I would love to see your final defense. You are at the edge of pushing what we are doing. Fascinating work. Good for you. Can you remind me again about how to log into PDNet and what's your username? I can't, but Sonia can. So type a note to Sonia at pd.education and catch her right now, because she's not working tomorrow, if you want to get in right away. Because all of you, your university has its own, so that you can go to pd.education and you come up with this. Let's see, is it here? I can show you here. You come up with something like this red, and it's got all your universities in it. No, and then you could click into your university, and then your username is your university email address, and your password is, let me look, if you're current right now, your password should be, I always have to look them up. It should be, starting this year for fall 2020, it was #123, your university letter, so say DCU, but the D is capitalized, hashtag. So #123, App State, but the A is capitalized, hashtag. That was the same format we used for all of them. So hopefully that helps. And we're 2 minutes ahead of time, which gives me 2 minutes to say how much I really appreciate the fact that you are all interested in this, because to me, the graduate education game is the most fascinating game in the world, and too many people are caught in stuff that they don't need to get caught in. So it's my pleasure to get to work with all of you and to see things like the fact that one of you is doing VR film. And so well done, you, all of you, no matter where you are in this process. And as a qualitative researcher, I wish you just the best, because it is the best, in my opinion. It's so much fun to see our world as only qualitative research and deep diving information can give it to us. So my last question, very interesting. I'm wanting to use MaxQDA to code and analyze LiDAR data. Would also love to see how this person is using MaxQDA. Okay, so if the person who is doing the VR is still in the room, and you are interested in having a conversation with somebody who is doing LiDAR, you can put your, well, Erica, you could put yours up, and then that person could pick it up too. So the two of you could put your email addresses, if you're interested, into the chat. And okay, good. Philip, meet Erica. Erica, meet Philip. The two of you are the two who are doing LiDAR and VR with MaxQDA. So there might be some interesting conversations for you. Great time, everybody. So with that, I'm stopping the recording. And